Hello everyone, welcome back. So I want to talk today about something that I call in-between books. And if you've seen my second Garbogist update video, I talked about this book, Their Finest Hour by Winston Churchill, and I referred to it as an in-between book. I believe that I did. That's how I referred to it in my own head anyway. And so what I use this book for, how I read this book, is that whenever I am in between, say, a novel and another novel or whatever, whenever I am in between books, I will pick this up and read it. And I'm familiar enough with the writer of the book, Winston Churchill. I'm familiar enough with the Second World War in general to put this down for weeks at a time and not pick it up. And when I do pick it up, I'm not lost. I recognize where I am. I know the people involved, the events going on. I'm not lost, so I just pick it up and I get right back into reading it. And that has been really, really nice to have, because in years past, I would sometimes have these really awful slumps. And I've had a couple this year too. At one point, I forgot that I was reading this, and so I spent about 4 or 5 days reading almost nothing. And that doesn't happen to me very often anymore. Now, in between my last Garbogist video and my second Garbogist video, I did go into a little bit of a slump for about 3 days, and I picked this up and I read about 200 pages now, and I only have about, I'm not sure, about 180 pages left, and most of the end of that is notes and things. And so it's gotten me thinking about what book I'm going to pick up next. And also I wanted to explain sort of what I think of as an in-between book, what doesn't count for me, what doesn't work for me that I have noticed over the years, or, well, yes, over the years, because this has been a process for me of finding books that I can read in between other books, because there are certain types of books that just don't work for me, that I will read a little bit of them and put them down and come back to them and not remember what was going on. Or say, for instance, essays. Essays don't work for me because I'm not sure why exactly, but I can read an essay and put a book down and then just completely forget about it for months. And that doesn't work for me. Now, novels don't work for me either. So if I were to pick up Don Quixote, for instance, now it's quite large, and it would seem like the perfect book because it's broken into, chapters and sections. But the likelihood is that if I pick that book up and I read 20 or 30 pages of it over a couple of days or a day or whatever, that I'll put it down, and 3 weeks later I'll go to pick it up and I won't remember where I left off, what exactly is going on. So I try to avoid books like that. And I try to go for books that I have with a subject that I am familiar with, that I can pick it up at any time and know what's going on. And if I have forgotten something, it'll be easy to look up, and I won't need to remember something that happened 100 pages before or anything like that. And so I have assembled a few books here that I think fit that bill, and one in particular that I will probably read, or that will replace this book after I'm finished with it in my in-between book slot. So first I want to talk about one that wouldn't fit, and that is The Pope Who Would Be King by David I. Kertzer. And the reason this wouldn't work is because I am not familiar with Pius IX. I don't know anything about his life. I don't know about any of his political or religious stances. I know very, very little about Italy in the 1800s. So the chances are, if I read 20 pages of this book and put it down for 3 weeks and came back, I would be completely 100% lost. And that wouldn't be the case for all the books like this, but it would be the case for a book like for this book. And so normally what I've been doing is I would just jump to the next book in Churchill's series on the Second World War. So this is the Grand Alliance. This is the third book. And I would just jump onto this and it would serve perfectly. But there's no rush. I have the whole series and I bought it for a really good price. I found it at a Goodwill. They were all kind of in bad shape. They looked like they were in bad shape. They're actually in very good shape, but they were very dirty and the covers were torn. And I got it for $11. And this series goes for over $100 whenever I find it at the bookstore, which is just nuts to me because you can find the individual ones for $5, $3, but when they get the whole set together, they jack it up to $100. I saw it for $150 about a month ago. But I like I said, I have no reason to rush those books. And so I've kind of been feeling like reading something different. So I've gotten together a few books here that may be my next in-between books, and I think one in particular will be. And I will talk about that one last, I think. So here is The Only Way to Cross by John Maxtone-Graham, and this is a big book about ocean liners. Now, to be fair, I don't know everything about ocean liners, but I am familiar enough with the subject where I would feel comfortable with this as an in-between book. And this was written, I believe, in the late 50s or the early 60s. Oh, no, I'm wrong. This is from the 70s, 1972. But it's really talking about the rise of the transoceanic liners and the fall. It was a very short period of time where you had these huge ships ferrying people across the oceans, and that came to an end really in the 50s, the early 50s, as travel by airplane became the norm, and jetliners and everything. But I would feel comfortable with this as an in-between book. And the next is Literature and Western Man by J.B. Priestley. And unfortunately, there's not a picture of J.B. Priestley. I wish there were so I could show it. He wrote a book, well, it was really a series of essays collected over time. It's called Essays of 5 Decades, and I really, really enjoyed that book. And I have another one of his books right over here by this candelabra called The English. And I really like the way that Priestley writes, or wrote. He's been dead for about 60 years at this point, probably longer than that. And so this is all about literature and Western literature. And let's see, we'll read some chapters here. The Italian scene in Machiavelli, England and Shakespeare, Spain and Cervantes, the drama, the novel, the Enlightenment, Rousseau and the Romantic Age. Let's see, the novelists, the poets, the dramatists, mostly before 1914, brief interlude between the wars. So I would feel comfortable picking this up and putting this down because now I haven't read every book he's going to refer to in this, certainly, but I've heard about most of the books he would talk about in this, and I would be familiar with them and I wouldn't feel lost. And I think this would be a really good in-between book, actually, because I'm not likely to just pick this up and read it from cover to cover, but I might read it over time. And next is a book that I had in my very second book haul. Or no, I think it was in my very first book haul. And please don't go back and watch that. That is embarrassing. But it was my very first video. And yeah, I did it right over here on the couch. And I was kind of embarrassed and didn't know exactly what to do. And I was kind of blinded by the camera, you know, stage fright and whatnot. But anyway, it is the Book of Legendary Lands by Umberto Eco. Eco? How do you pronounce his last name? Eco? But this is really neat. It is all about made up lands, from literature, from myths. It's very wonderfully illustrated, very interesting. This was only $3. It is very heavy on really nice paper. Here's some giant mushrooms. Is that from, let's see. It is from the Journey to the Center of the Earth. That is the forest of giant mushrooms. I love Journey to the Center of the Earth, even though as I've gotten older, I've realized that it is completely absurd. And I read it not too long ago, reread it for probably the fourth or fifth time. But anyway, I just think this would be a really interesting in-between book. Another important thing about the in-between books is that they need to be small enough that I can carry them upstairs and downstairs. So this is upstairs, and then, you know, my bedroom is downstairs. And I would love sometime for them to be like coffee table books. I have a lot of coffee table books, and I really like them. But lugging them up and down the stairs is a hassle. And so I like them to be portable, and so I can take them other places if I need to. So the next is PrairyErth by William Least Heat Moon. I read his book Blue Highways. I really liked it, even though I felt like he just kind of traveled around the country, but maybe he didn't learn very much, which that's okay. And maybe he did learn a lot that just didn't make it into the book. And this is an interesting book, though. He decides to, or he decided, this is in the 80s, I believe, he decided to spend one entire book talking about Kansas and nothing but Kansas. Every county in Kansas, just as much of Kansas as he could possibly write about and see. And I have started this before, and it starts off on the, is it like the tall grass prairie? And so there, in years past, many years ago, the prairie in certain areas of the Midwest was actually 7 feet tall. Like the grass was 7 feet tall, and it just went on for miles and miles and miles. And now there is one small patch in Kansas, apparently. And it's, you know, it's old. It's from the 80s, or it's old for a book of this type because the people in it, a lot of the people in this are probably dead now, and the businesses and things like that probably aren't there anymore. But I think this would make a really interesting in-between book because he's always moving on to a new place and meeting new people and seeing new things, and I think that would make a really good in-between book. And there are two more here. This is the second of a 2-volume series. I've already read the first volume several years ago, and I've been meaning to return to the second. It is William Manchester's The Glory and the Dream, A Narrative History of America 1932 to 1972. There is William Manchester. So I have read his Last Lion series, and I've read The Glory and the Dream Part 1. This picks up somewhere in the 50s and goes until 1972, and it's a good deal of this is about the Kennedy era, and I really like the way that William Manchester writes. I'm familiar with this period of American history, so I could pick it up and not feel lost. And it's cut up into short chapters. Let's see, how long is this whole thing? So both volumes are 1,600 pages long. This one is roughly 800 pages long. And so that would last for quite a while, and it would be perfect for that sort of in-between reading. And the last book is the one that I think that I'm most likely to read, the most likely to be my next in-between book, which is James Michener's Iberia. So this is all about Spain, and Michener's travels through Spain. He went to Spain many times, apparently, and traveled around, and each chapter is about a different area of Spain. So that's interesting. They're pretty long chapters, and the writing is very small. It's very there are a lot of pictures, and that's what I'm trying to say. There are a lot of pictures of the people he saw and met, the places he went. And the only thing that kind of puts me off about this is that there's a good deal of bullfighting in this, and I could do without that personally. There's a chapter about bullfighting, and I'd probably just skip that. But I do think this would be a really good in-between book, because I could read a chapter and put it down. And now I'm not super familiar with the politics of Spain or anything like that, but it's a travelogue mostly, and I don't think that I would have a problem with that as an in-between book. But if I did, I could always put it down and read something else. And the trouble with in-between books is, if they're really interesting, I might just wind up reading them cover to cover. And I don't think that I would do that with this, just because it is so long. This is a 930 some odd page paperback. This is from the 60s. This is from 1968. And it's in really good shape. I'm kind of afraid that it might fall apart if I were to carry it upstairs and downstairs and upstairs and downstairs. But yeah, this is most likely to be my next in-between read. So I would love to hear your thoughts on in-between reads, and I would love to hear about how you keep yourself reading during a slump, or if you don't keep yourself reading during a slump, or if you think this might work for you the way it's worked for me. I'd love to hear your thoughts about these books. For instance, what do you think about Iberia? If you've ever read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I have read 2 books by Michener before, The Bridges of Toko, or is it The Bridges at Toko, or The Bridges of Toko? I always forget. And then, what's the other one? I just finished it a couple of months ago. The Bridge at something. It was about the Hungarian Revolution, and it was pretty good. I didn't like it as much as I liked The Bridges at Toko, but I've talked about that in another video, why I liked it, what I didn't like about it. Yeah, so if you think this could help you, I'd love to hear about that. And I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope this wasn't too disjointed. I feel like I kind of got off on some tangents and rambled a little bit, which is something I'm prone to doing. Yeah, so thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.